ESPN NFL Nation Jaguars reporter Mike DiRocco joins us right now on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. Mike, how you doing today?
Good. How are you?
Doing pretty good. So, one of the things that stands out from this game, a lot, especially for people in this area, is the fact that Nick Foles is now down in Jacksonville, and he's got a former coach with him, DiFilippo. So, kind of give our audience an idea of what's been going on down there with the Foles-DiFilippo reconnection and how that's kind of had an impact on the Jags so far this early in the preseason.
Yeah, well, Nick has said that, the offense that DiFilippo's installed here is probably about 50% something that he already knew and was familiar with, and 50% new stuff, that DiFilippo may have brought with him from Minnesota. And that's made it obviously much easier for Foles to kind of assimilate. And that has been really evident in the way that, he's performed here, in training camp. He's had a couple of bad days, but everybody has bad days. But for the most part, he's been really, really good. And the offense has been really, last year was a liability. And now it's functioning. It's, had its moments against a pretty good defense in camp. And it looks like that this team should be able to rely on the offense to win some games, which is a massive change from last year.
You mentioned about it being a massive change. Outside of just Foles obviously being a better quarterback than Blake Bortles, do you feel like the offense that DiFilippo has brought to Jacksonville is also an upgrade over the offense that was in place last year?
It's hard to tell until I see it, during regular season games. But I think the biggest issue is the quarterback. Blake was, once the fifth game hit last year and he turned it over 5 times against Kansas City, the offense just, excuse my language, went to the toilet after that. They scored 2 touchdowns in their last 5 games. It was just awful. And it was non-functional. And that bled over into the locker room. It bled over into the defense. Those guys knew going out there that second half of the season that they had to hold the team to 10 or fewer points if they had a chance to win. So that wears on a team. And I think just knowing Foles is here and knowing that the offense can make plays, that they're willing to go down the field much more, which is something that is sort of shown itself in this offense, that it's more downfield shots. I think the defense will be able to feed off that a little bit. They know that they don't have to carry this team. So I think that's probably been the biggest difference.
Mike, I want to be fair here because although Nick Foles has done a lot here in Philadelphia, and by no means necessary am I trying to say that Foles isn't a good quarterback, but let's not forget his whole time in Philly where he's been hot and cold, especially when he has to play more than a couple of games. Now that he's the starter in Jacksonville, are there fans that are worried that not that he won't be good, because I think that he'll be okay, but they're not getting the Foles that beat Brady in the Super Bowl or played lights out in the playoffs last year? Like, they're getting a quarterback who may not turn it over a ton, but can have games where he looked like back a la 2013 against the Cowboys where he looked like a guy that was lost.
Yeah, that's what I've kind of been cautioning fans around here. Look, it was so bad here last year, and Blake Bortles' tenure here was so up and down, mostly down, that when the Jaguars fans see a guy like Foles, they know what he did in Philly coming in, and they've seen him in these open practices, and we've been writing about it and talking about it, and that he's such an upgrade from Blake Bortles. I think fans use that, and they elevate him higher than he should be in the tier of quarterbacks. Foles is an above-average quarterback, but he's not an elite quarterback. But because of what they've had here before, fans look at him like the savior. And I think that's going to be an issue at some point. The other thing you didn't mention is Foles has gone into the season as the unquestioned starter just twice in his career, and he never finished the season. He got hurt, and that's going to be an issue to monitor too. Can he stay healthy? Because they don't have anything back behind him. I understand Jaguars fans' elation at finally having a guy that they feel like can lead them, that can make plays, that won't be just god-awful on some Sundays. But, you have to take it, like you said, look at it with a little bit of, intelligence. I shouldn't say that because it makes them sound bad, but they're just so happy that they finally got a guy here that they feel like can make plays and won't have just ridiculously terrible stretches that last for weeks.
Yeah, part of the problem is when you strike out on a guy like Blake Bortles, that's a guy that you drafted third overall in the draft. He was a young quarterback that was supposed to kind of grow with your franchise, and now you're getting a free agent quarterback. Nick Foles isn't a young guy anymore, and even if he doesn't play at that Super Bowl caliber level, you're still getting a guy who's kind of being a placeholder until you can get a young guy in here. And my next question to you is that are the expectations unfair because you got a defense? You're counting on Leonard Fournette to be the guy he was in his rookie year, not the guy he was last year. And you're asking Nick Foles not just to not turn the football over, but to kind of show glimpses of the guy he's been in Philly in his glory days. Is it unfair to think that in a division where you got the Texans, you got the Colts, and then you don't know what the Titans are going to be, that you are, again, a Super Bowl caliber team?
Yeah, those expectations are a little unfair, for sure, a little high. But, I would say they're probably more unfair and higher on Leonard Fournette than they are on Nick Foles because fans, and I wrote it, there's been a lot of positive signs that he has matured, that he has taken that next step, that he's going to be a guy they can rely on. And DiFilippo has said, look, he's going to be a major reason our offense works because of him. He's going to be heavily involved in the pass game. And I always caution people, look, you can't count on anything from Leonard Fournette because of what he showed last year and part of what he showed as a rookie. So the expectations on him, to me, are a little more unfair than they are on Foles. Look, you can win and win big in this league with an above-average quarterback. That's no doubt in my mind. You can get to a Super Bowl with a guy like that if you have some other pieces in place. This division, the news on Andrew Luck, from the last couple of days, no one seems to know when he's going to be back on the field. That makes things significantly easier for the Jags if he's unable to play most of the year. Marcus Mariota in Tennessee, he's not been anything special, and he hasn't really had a good training camp either. So if you're the Jags, you think, okay, we've got healthy guys back on defense. Calais Campbell is going to be healthy all year. We're sitting here. The Jags are sitting there monitoring his work in practice. They're going to monitor his snap count. Unique Ngakoue is back, and he's ready to basically destroy this franchise for not giving him a contract. So he's supremely motivated. Adding Josh Allen to the mix, the rookie out of Kentucky who fell to them at 7. A.J. Boye, Jalen Ramsey, the corners. You know what? That's a pretty good unit right there. And if they can get anything out of the offense, then I don't see a reason why they can't win this division. That being said, that first stretch of games at home against Kansas City, on the road against Houston, and at home against Tennessee, who has just absolutely owned this franchise the last several years, that's a pretty tough start. But I wouldn't, for the most part, I don't think the expectations on Foles are unfair. They might be just a little bit over the top at times, but I do think most people here aren't expecting him to throw for 5,035 touchdowns. I think they understand that it'll be a little bit more dependent on Fournette.
Mike DiRocco joining us, the Boardwalk on the hotline on 97.3 ESPN. You can follow on Twitter at ESPN DiRocco. And you want to follow Mike DiRocco because you mentioned Leonard Fournette and you mentioned DiFilippo. Well, in Minnesota and Philadelphia, they had multiple backs working in there. And one of those backs in camp right now is a local kid in our area, Ryquell Armstead, Millville High School graduate, went to Temple, very talented runner. How's he been looking so far in camp?
They really like him. He's looked pretty good, and he runs angry, which is interesting to me because sometimes Leonard Fournette doesn't seem to run angry all the time, but every time I saw Ryquell Armstead with the ball in camp, he was running angry, and he's got a little bit more elusiveness than I think I thought. Watching him in camp, he's made a couple of moves that you're like, I didn't know he had that. I mean, he came in with the reputation as more of just a downhill thumper. But it's a good mix for the Jags because they want to have a guy similar to Leonard Fournette's running style so they can kind of do the same thing if and when Leonard's out of the game, whether it's for a rest or for injury. So he's been really one of the highlights of camp for this team. They've, obviously he was banged up for a little bit, but seemed to be okay after 2 or 3 days after being on the shelf and has been fine ever since. So the Jags are really excited about him. And if this works out the way they plan and they get some good production out of him, then maybe you can see next year in Leonard Fournette's final year more of an equal workload between those two.
How's the competition overall at running back? 'Cause you got Alfred Blue down there, you got Thomas Rawls along with Armstead. So how are things looking overall with the running back depth chart, and how would that impact Armstead's touches when the season starts?
Yeah, I mean, I think that Alfred Blue's kind of established himself as the number 2 at this point because of his experience and because of his, work in the past. So, I would think Armstead's no worse than 3. The team cut Benny Cunningham a couple of days ago in an injury settlement, so that really kind of paves the way for Thomas Rawls to make this team as sort of the third down back, a guy that they can count on as a pass catcher as well. But they do like Armstead, and they're going to get him the ball. I don't know if it's possible at this point to put a number on carries or assign a percentage to carries, but I think as the season goes on, I think we'll see him getting more and more work over some of the other guys behind Fournette.
Mike, you mentioned injuries. I know there's been a lot of injuries going on down there in Jacksonville. How is the number of injuries going to impact the players we're actually going to see on the field in the preseason game tonight?
Yeah, there's not going to be very many starters, if at all, playing. Certainly you're not going to see, Calais Campbell and Marcel Darius, and may not see Unique Ngakoue. Probably won't see Miles Jack on defense. Jalen Ramsey, A.J. Boye, those guys aren't probably going to play. You flip to the offensive side, pretty much the entire offensive line's not going to play with the exception of maybe A.J. Cann. Not expecting to see Fournette, Foles, most of the wide receivers. If any of those top wide receivers play, it'll be DJ Chark. I just expect a repeat of the first game when they had 31 players, including, I want to say it was 19 starters off the top of my head that did not play against Baltimore last week. We just had a massive bout of rain here, so the field's nice and slick, and it's expected to rain again tonight during the game. So I think they're going to be ultra, ultra cautious, and we will see very few starters tonight.
Again, Eagles-Jags tonight here on 97.3 ESPN. Coverage begins at 6 o'clock with 7 o'clock kickoff. And Mike DiRocco has been our guest on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. Follow him on Twitter at ESPN DiRocco. And again, Ryquell Armstead expected to get some touches tonight. Millville High School's own. Mike, appreciate the time here, and hopefully you stay dry tonight with the weather down there.
Yeah, I'm going to do my best. Thanks for having me, guys.